least burden to the citizenry that you can come up with, a plan that you can come up with.
And Mr. Mayor, with that said, we can certainly have the judicial planners, consultants look at Recorder's Court as they look at the Superior and all of the other courts, and we'll at least have that information. And to Councilor Allen's point, if the judicial center was built down and connected to the jail, it would make sense to have Recorder's Court in that judicial center, because for safety, and we could eliminate the transportation cost. I see those people coming and going every day. Our sheriff department, moving people in for court and trying to move them out, and that's a whole different ball game in itself. Especially when they're the high-profile cases. I mean, it's a nightmare. And just think, if the judicial center was connected to the jail, the public would never see that. It'd be seamless. And it would make sense that Recorder's Court would be a part of that new facility, and you could use that portion of the building to create a mental health wing or do whatever you want to do, because it's already connected. So we will include in the scope for the judicial consultant to look at Recorder's Court in the process.
And that would be wise. And you can connect it. I mean, you can connect it maybe and still stay low to the ground and deal with some of your cost factors, or you can do a separate building. Either way, but I think that it can be laid out in such a way to do exactly what you're talking about, coordinating and working in synergy, as I said earlier. And I think that you may, again, I go housing everything under one roof. That's massive. But if you break it down in smaller buildings, it's more cost-effective and doable. And another thing, too, is we need to understand, I'm not saying that our local GCs and subcontractors are not qualified, but the bigger and the higher up you go, you start getting into another level that you're going to have to go outside to other areas to find that kind of expertise to come in, and then they're going to bring specialized labor and all. And then if you can even get that in Columbus, Georgia, it's going to add to the construction schedules and the timing of all this stuff. So, keeping it lower, smaller, all of our GCs would have an opportunity to participate, and even our local subcontractors. I like that concept. So just wanted to add that to it.
Thank you. Councilor Thomas?
I know that it will not come as a surprise to you that one of my issues in all of these things is making sure that we get input from the people who are going to be affected by this. I do think that the judicial consultant needs to be consulted on all of the judicial issues, including Recorder's Court. What do we do with Recorder's Court? But I would also like for us to make sure that we are talking to the other people who use our facilities. It may be that we could contact some of the various organizations in town about making a presentation at their meeting. I don't know if the Bar Association would let us come to a meeting of the Bar Association and have input. The Realtors group, let them have input. I do think it's important for us to have the employees of the city, both those who are currently housed at the annex and the ones that are housed uptown, talk about what they think and what they need. The thing that came to my mind was, I don't know if some of you may recall that when we, as we were building this building, the counselors were invited to come out here to take a look at this room before it was completed. And at that point, there was not a step over here. This was blocked, blocked off. And we said, wait, we need to be able to come down and up on both sides. We were able to do that because the room was not finished. We didn't have to, start whatever. And so some of those kinds of things. I'm thinking Rotary, Kiwanis, all of those folks may be interested in having a presentation, and we need to make this very clear, if we are moving toward a SPLOST, this is not a pitch for voting for the SPLOST, but it is an input session. And I also would like for us to have some kind of, I'm not sure how we would do this, but some way of responding to citizens who have suggestions about what we need to do. For example, I hear all the time, why don't you move this into the Kmart building or the Sears building? Well, we need to be able to say to those folks, here's some reasons why we don't do that. And I'm not sure that we have that official capability, if you will. My first issue is it takes them off the tax roll. But other than that, I don't want to go to Sears Roebuck building to get into that traffic, those kinds of things. But I just think we need to be very, very aggressive, if you will, to make sure that anybody who wants to have input has the opportunity to do that. And particularly including our employees who are going to be working in that facility, both the judicial employees as well as the administrative employees. Some of the people who work in that building now, who use that building now on a regular basis, are not attorneys, but they use some of the legal areas that are there. I'm thinking about some of the realtor people, and so some of those kinds of things. So just remember that Councilor Thomas is going to say, well, have you talked to so-and-so? Thank you.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor and members of council, as I said, you're going to hear me mention on a regular basis the timeline, and in an effort to kind of keep things moving. And so we have put on the table option 2 buildings, existing site, and option 4, 2 buildings, new site. And so what we would like to do, because we got to continue this discussion, we got to come back and talk about options again, but we want to come back having moved options 1 and 3 off the list and talk about option 2, option 4, and then any mixture of hybrid of the 2. I heard add in the 3rd building, but we'd be talking about these 2 plus whatever else you want to do. And it could be, again, a mix of the 2 or something different, but at the end of the day, we may at some point have a hybrid of option 2, option 4, and something new, and we may have one option. We may have option 2 and the hybrid and take option 4 off and have 2 options. But we'd like to come back, and we're going to have to keep bringing this back as an update and discussion at every meeting until we can agree on one or two. We have $1 million to start looking at options, and so we gotta come to some agreement at some point that this is the one or these are the two that we're going to look at, and it could be option 2 or 4 as we recommend them today, or that mix that one of these two come off and you have one of the two and whatever option you come up with. So if there's no objection, we're going to move options 1 and 3 off the list. And so we're now discussing 2, and then you can create anything you want from there. If that's
And I think what we need to do, though, going forward, even though we don't have a majority, and this is not official votes, I think that it's not only perfectly okay, but it's good. Like Councilor Davis comes up with an idea, I've as a developer, I know some efficiencies that might be gained through doing 3 or 4 buildings. I think early on, we just vote on them. We try to keep it at 2 and vote on them. One will be dropped off. And then, because the issue we're going to run into eventually, once we get the design team on board, is they have to start doing the work to give you a cost for the options we have. Now, we can do multiple options. We can do 3 or 4 more, but there is a cost that will be associated with expanding the number of options we're looking at. So I think this is too big of an issue to do by consensus. I think this is something that we have to actually ask people to voice their opinion and vote, and then the 2 winners move on.
Well, and if that's the case, Mayor, if we want to vote, then on the next meeting, I would be asking you to vote to remove options 1 and 3 and further discuss 2, 4, or any new option you want to introduce.
Yeah, and then if a counselor says, well, I've been thinking about this, I've been talking to people, I'd like this under the consideration as well, under consideration, we can put that up as a vote as well. When we really need to narrow it is when we get that design team on board. Okay, we've got a number of people wanting to speak. I guess I lit a fire. Councilor Davis.
Yeah, Mr. City Manager, let me, if we're going to have further discussion, I know we got 5 members here, so there's no vote going to be taken today, but I think 4 is your best option. And let me encourage you to, or maybe council, to really think about 2 here, okay? I don't even look at that as an option. The more and more I've thought about that over time, it's not. I go back to what I said earlier. Can you imagine moving a massive amount of people with the technology and communications attached, with all the different departments that work together? You tell me where in Columbus, Georgia, you're going to put these people. You tell me where in Uptown you're going to put them. Are you going to build a new facility and erect it and then set it up where you have courts operating and all the other stuff that we just went through? I mean, we saw the challenge that we just dealt with, having to deal with the pipes breaking in the courts. Now, to go out and do that and then tear everything down and then try to fit which is going to build, I go back to a building getting massive on that site, it's going to take a long time to get all that stuff done, and it's going to cost a lot of money. That's not good for the city. So I don't look at that as an option anymore, and I think when people understand that.
Well, let me say this, Councilor. Don't mean to interrupt you, but and option 4, I hear you. Option 2, stayed on the table, allows us the opportunity. We said additional consideration, judicial, legal, community input, and the mayor has indicated that we've already scheduled some time. We've already talked to the senior judge, but we've scheduled, or the chief judge, I should say, but we've already scheduled to meet with the bar And I don't, this allows them the opportunity to be heard. We share all that we get from them with you, because, I mean, we get feedback saying they are partial to the existing site. And so with these two, you still got the options, but at least we get to hear them out before you make your final selection of site. So the mayor has scheduled a meeting with the executive committee, with the full bar, and we're going to have that conversation to at least hear from them.
Well, I think that, and that's good. I mean, you talk to, look, people, you have to adapt to change sometimes. And, you know, if it's in the vicinity and you create something that has synergy and it's coefficient that works with everybody, yeah, it may be, you might have to walk a couple blocks, you might have to ride a scooter. You know, but
Oh, boy.
it's not that, you know, if it's master planned, again, I go back to the footprint and where. If it's master planned and done right, you're not talking about a major, it's uptown, all of it's uptown. But, you know, you're somewhat, you're still somewhat in the vicinity, but the cost, the magnitude of the cost and the challenge to go back at option 2, I think if you really break that down, you're going to find out that's going to be extremely costly and challenging and time-consuming, et cetera. But I will say this too. What we're trying to do, if we want to move this thing along, you need to give that option to the planners and let them work with you. You don't need to give 2 options and start playing with 2 options.
No, we want to get to one option.
Okay.
The final, whatever it's going to be. I want to move from 4 to 2 right now.
Right.
And then the goal is to go from 2 to 1, and it may be that you start mixing and you ultimately end up with 1, and we're going to have, I don't really like the idea of spending money on 2 options to study them. And so we need to come to 1, but to go from 4 to 2, if we walk out of here today with 2, we've accomplished something today.
No, I think I go back to what I said. You look at option 2, I mean, you're going to find, you break it all down, you're going to find out that it's just an overwhelming challenge. So it doesn't make sense from that standpoint.
I got you. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Councilor Garrett?
I've already, since I am a lawyer, I've already heard a lot from the lawyers. I'll go and throw this out there. I mean, I understand the concerns about option 1, but just for our discussions at the next meeting, the hybrid that has been expressed to me has been demolish the wings so all the judges can stay in the tower, build something there, and they don't care what we do with the tower. So, I mean, I'm kind of inclined to kind of do a hybrid of that, and what Councilor Crabb had suggested, maybe we get that on the tax rolls and give the tower to somebody to develop right next to the Judicial Center and put a new city services building or multiple ones off-site somewhere. But that would be what I've heard from the lawyers.
And I think that's part of the process, is getting
Right.
feedback and being able to kind of
That's
see
it.
where because sometimes when you get suggestions, you really have to dig deeper to get to the real reason for those suggestions. So I appreciate your carrying that water for the attorneys.
And so,
Councilor Crabb?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, sir.
I was just going to say, and based on what Councilor Garrett just said, see that, it may be that instead of 2 or 4, we end up with that as the single option. So, but at least move from 4 to 2, and then those 2, and then a mix, and then you come up with an option, and that could be the option. I don't know.
Council's going to decide.
That's
Not
right.
the administration. So
Yeah.
we're going to listen and do what council's preference is.
I was looking at this recommendation, and on option 2, really the only pro, because you can maintain the historic site even with option 4, the only pro would be the attorney's offices within close proximity. And, you know, I respect what the attorneys are saying about the demolition and everything, but is it really that far if we're moving the site to what is it, 4 blocks away, 6 blocks away to where the jail location is that really a burden to them? And I'm asking you because you've spoken with them, Walker. I know. But from what
I'll tell you that I've heard from them, yes, it's a big issue.
it's a huge issue.
Yep, when you
Even
talk
the
about,
4 to 6 blocks.
yeah, if you're doing trial law, if you're a trial lawyer, going across Veterans Parkway on foot is a concern. So we've talked about different ways to mitigate that, but there'll be a lot of, I think it's going to be good to let them express those thoughts, and then we can kind of look for ways to mitigate it. If we can, maybe the option stays on. If we can't, then it's up to y'all whether or not we look at another alternative.
Okay.
Councilor Thomas?
One of the things that I would like to see, we have sort of generically said, put it down by the jail. There are a lot of places down by the jail, and I would be interested to see where we're talking about down by the jail. Specifically, I know that we own property down and around that area. I also know that we don't own a lot of that property down there, and so, and I would have to, submit to somebody who is better, has more knowledge than I do about the size of the footprint. How large is it? What does that mean? If you're talking about a 224,000 square foot building, what does that mean? I also would say that, Mr. City Manager, I'm not sure who came up with 4 options. I would assume it was somebody on staff. And so those were not 4 options that council came up with and approved. And so I would think that it would be appropriate, if you will, for staff and the administration to come back to us and say, we've looked at all of this, we are now ready to go to the two options. One, and it may be that the option at this point, the 2 options at this point, is something on the site where it is now, and something at another site, and this is the site we're talking about, this other site, so that we can make some of those kinds of decisions. We don't have to today decide if they're going to be 2 buildings on whatever site we determine, or 4 buildings, or whatever. That's why we're hiring these professionals to make those kinds of recommendations to us. So I think that we're well on that way, and I'm just ready for you guys to say, here's what we need to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, Mr. Mayor, I want to make sure that Councilor Thomas, so if we come back next business meeting and include a resolution proposing further consideration on 2 sites or any combination or of the 2 options or something different that council comes up with. But I guess my point is trying to figure out a resolution to remove options 1 and 3 and keep these 2, but that's not final, those 2. It would be, or any
Combination thereof.
yes.
Well, I mean, we're in the process, according to what you're saying here, of hiring the experts.
Yes.
To tell us what we ought to do. Let's listen to the experts before we make a final decision. I think it is appropriate for you to come back to us and say, we've taken a look at what's here so far, and this is what we're recommending, that we narrow it down a little bit.
Sure.
With the understanding, and council will need to have this understanding, that when we hire these professionals, if they tell us, you cannot do this on that site
Sure.
for whatever reasons,
Yes,
that we can change our mind.
okay. So,
It's our prerogative to change our mind.
so, and we can certainly, someone like the smart lawyers will have to word it, properly, but I guess the point that I want to get to is removing the two and kind of narrowing our focus so that we can continue to move towards either a single site or...
So just remove them, Mr. City Manager. You put them on there, just remove them.
Well, and that's what I was, that's what I was...
For those two, you have a consensus of everybody that I have heard say, remove those two.
What
happens with those other two is still under discussion.
What you'll probably see is next time we meet, those two will be gone, and there'll be some modifications based on the information that you have provided and what we've heard today to the remaining two, and then we'll continue to whittle it down.
That's right.
It's literally like a sculpture. It's not so much getting that picture right, it's just chipping away the part that don't look like the picture.
That's right. And so, Mayor, that's well stated, and so that's what we'll do.
Good.
Okay, Counselor, is that all, ma'am? Counselor Davis?
Yeah, I just want to go back to that what I initially said in my first time I spoke earlier on. I talked about the opportunity of having a revitalization catalyst, okay? Really doing something wonderful in your community. And look, when you've got a chance to do it, we've got a chance to do that. And when you really look at this, you look at the various, I guess, trades in respect to what people do. Consultants only, the judicial consultant that we're hiring deals with space. They're going to deal with space, and they're going to tell you about the rooms and all the rest of the stuff. You're going to give them a directive in how you're going to deal with the buildings, whether you're going to go up or out or lower or 2 or 3 or 4. You're giving them those directions. They're just going to deal with space, interior space. The architects and everything else deal with exteriors, looks, design, all that kind of stuff. It goes back to you got to find a footprint. You got to find where to do all this. And I keep throwing that master plan out there. And Mayor, I want to go back to, I know that we're talking about all these people being involved, but just because you got a trade that does business, so to speak, in an area doesn't mean that you cater to that one group. I mean, this is a little more beyond all that. Because if it's not done right, you're just going to continue to push a burden onto the taxpayers. We don't need to do that. You got to answer all those questions. So when you have an opportunity to do something good for a community, you look at 2. Somebody tell me what changes with 2. What changes with 2 other than a new building and one next to it that's sitting there? You got to figure out what to do with it. All right? And you don't even know what that building is going to look like. Nothing changes. But if you look at something new that you can marry with the old that you can renovate, and you look at the developers in town, I said this earlier, you need to go to the developers. You need to, some of these key leaders there investing big money in our community, okay, and find out what they're doing, and it needs to be master planned with what they're doing, because you got an opportunity to do something awesome in changing the character of your community. That, to me, is more valuable than just a building back as usual and business as usual. Nothing changes. So these are things you got to really think about when you're looking at these options. And then I'm just telling you, you're going to find out that, building a building in that one site is going to be very, very costly. And look, when it's all finished, we can figure out what to do with that government center. I mean, there's a lot of suggestions. It's not going anywhere. I look at that being on down the line, but let me tell you something. Outside the city, CSU, Total Systems, Aflac, tell me who has the capital, tell me who has the money to put in that building and fix it up like what we're talking about. You got to consider that. I just don't think that anybody's going to come along and just go into a building that's not. Is the city going to be responsible for upgrading that and leasing it? Or are you just going to sell it like it is? What's the next person going to do with it?
Yeah.
That's a lot of money that somebody's got to come up with. I don't think just anybody can put that money in it. There's no developer. You're going to have some big publicly traded corporation that's got money that they can use, and I don't know if they're interested in it.
Right. I agree.
So, I mean, these are it's a little beyond just building a building, but when you add all that up, I think it goes to option 4 in creating a revitalization catalyst that needs to be master planned in our community. Mayor, I hope you would talk to some of these developers and people who are actively involved in looking at that. Maybe there's something that can be done bigger than what we're even talking about now.
Well, I think certainly there's been a lot of discussion. I know John Redmond has spoken very passionately at most of the meetings about the idea of using, and I have actually advocated, all things being equal, that I'd love to see at least one of the buildings put in an area to try to stimulate some economic development. My thoughts have always been that helps to shift an expense to an investment, because you're going to get some kind of return. You know, how much depends on where and what the building adds to the area. So I appreciate your comments. Councilor Crabb?
I'd like to make a recommendation based on what Councilor Garrett said, and then just from looking all of this over. Instead of option 2 and option 4, I'd like to recommend we get rid of option 2 and 3, and we consider option 1 and option 4. I think I made it pretty obvious that my vote would go for option 4, but having option 1 left on the table also keeps in motion if we find out from the legislature that we cannot move the site like what we want to do, then we have that option of remaining in that location with the judicial. It also limits the amount of demolition cost. And it limits the logistics of moving employees and the courts around.
Well, and I tell you, probably the most effective way to get this, because we're all going to have our favorites, and I think the best way to move this forward is let us bring you the recommendations, and then your votes around this table will tell us which ones we get rid of, which ones we keep. And that's not the final story. We're going to continue to do this, because I like what Councilor Davis is saying. He's got some additions that he's thinking about with regards to option 4. There's been some concern about renovating the existing building. Where do we put the individuals? A valid concern. There's been questions about you can't use that site and tear down the tower. And logistically, you can. It's messy, but you can keep people in the tower till the new building, if you stayed on that site, on the original site, was constructed, and then tear down. So there's a lot of different deviations from just this black and white or this orange and blue, which I'm not a fan of what's called, but we're like, hey, go dogs, man, what can I say? No, I'm just kidding. But I think what my point is that let us bring you the recommendations that we have heard the most throughout the community, and then it's up to this body to begin to help us to funnel that down to where we've got a workable plan. And it will be, as Councilor Thomas pointed out, once the experts are on board, once the design team's on board, and once the contractor gets on board, they'll begin to flesh out the actual expenses that are going to be going along with each of these different options. Also gives us a chance to try to look at some other properties. I know Councilor Davis has mentioned other properties that we may not currently own, but that might lend themselves to a more of a campus style, as he has talked about. This gives us a chance to kind of flesh those out as well.
So, Mr. Mayor, we will certainly do that. If there are no questions, we will close this one out, if there are no further questions. Okay, and so we will move to sales tax funding options. And Mayor and Council, this is, I asked staff to put this together kind of as an education piece not so much just for city council, but for those in the audience and watching by television, just so that we know that they have a better understanding of the sales tax that we currently have in Columbus, where it goes, what it's used for, and the various types of funding mechanisms and what restrictions we have on them. So Deputy City Manager will share that with you and with the public, those watching by television.
So just to start off, Muskogee County sales tax rate, in the first column are the different types of sales taxes that exist, and the next column shows that current rate. So we currently have 4% state. We have a local option sales tax, which we call a LOST. We have a 1% other local option sales tax, which is referred to as an OLOST. The school district has an E-SPLOST, which is Education Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax, and that's 1%. And we currently have a T-SPLOST, which is a Transportation Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax. So current rate is 8%. Beginning January 1, it will go to 7%. The school district's E-SPLOST ends on June 30th, so the sales tax will actually drop July 1st to 7%. If there's a...
Next year, July 1 of next year.
Yes, ma'am. July 1, 2020, thank you. If the SPLOST is successful on November 3rd, that SPLOST will go into effect April 1st of 2021, which we would then at that point go back to an 8% sales tax. In December 31 of 2022, the T-SPLOST will expire, and at that time the sales tax would go back to 7%. That would be effective 1/1 of 2023. Just a little history of the sales tax. The OLOST and the LOST, when they were effective, there's been 4 educational SPLOSTs in place, 2 SPLOST, Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax, and then 1 T-SPLOST. So this gives you those effective dates and the end dates of those different types of SPLOST and LOST. The local option sales tax was effective in 1976. It's a permanent 1% sales tax, and it can be utilized really for any operational costs, personnel, operating, or capital, and it is considered to be part of the general fund of the city. The other local option sales tax was effective in 2009. It is, again, a permanent 1% sales tax. It can be used, personnel, operating, or capital, and at that time that it was approved, it was committed 70% to public safety and 30% to infrastructure. It is a part of the general fund, but it's kept segregated for reporting purposes that was reported to council on a monthly basis. A special purpose local option sales tax is up to 1% of a sales tax. It can be used for capital outlay projects only. That's roads, bridges, sidewalks, trails, stormwater, facilities, vehicles, major equipment, those types of projects. It cannot be used for operating expenses or maintenance. There's a lot of questions about SPLOST. Why don't you use it for raises, personnel type things? It cannot be used for those types of purposes. It's imposed for a maximum of 5 years, except if it's imposed by a consolidated government when a general obligation debt is issued in conjunction with the SPLOST. In that case, the collection ends when the amount of revenue is generated. So there are different provisions for a consolidated government when a GO bond is issued. The education SPLOST is up to 1%, can only be used for educational capital outlay projects. It cannot be used for operating and maintenance. And those E-SPLOSTs are imposed for a maximum of 5 years. The transportation special purpose local option sales tax is up to 1%. It's used for transportation capital projects specifically, imposed for a 10-year period. It can be imposed as a regional T-SPLOST. We are part of the River Valley region, which is 16 counties. It can also be a single county T-Splost. That was actually included in legislation after the regional T-Splost was voted. That Transportation Investment Act was in 2010, which established the 12 districts throughout the state. And there is a regional transportation roundtable, which made up of elected officials within that region that approves and reviews the project list. The current T-Splost is a regional T-Splost. The River Valley, composed of 16 counties, was approved July 31 of 2012, included almost $600 million worth of projects, 23 throughout the region. The total vote, 30,000 yes, 20,000 no. 13 counties approved it, 3 counties did not approve. 75% of the funds are allocated to projects. They're pay-as-you-go. There's no advance funding related to those projects. As we talked about with the SPLOST, there were projects that were in bands, so they were funded throughout the 10-year period. 25% of the funds is used, it's what's called local discretionary, which we talk about during the budget process each year. This is just so you'll have the information how those votes were allocated to the different counties, yes and no votes, and those counties where they approved the T-Splost and those that did not approve, but you can see it's based on the total of the 16 counties, not individual counties adopted T-Splost. 15 of the 16 counties in the River Valley have passed resolutions to support the continuation of a T-Splost. City Council approved a resolution 159-19 that declined support. Obviously, the discussion that we had previous to this was looking at a SPLOST as opposed to a T-Splost to meet the needs of the city at this time. But because 15 of those 16 counties in the River Valley have approved a resolution to continue the SPLOST, there will be a roundtable set up as they move forward with that discussion. It's scheduled for September the 4th, so it's coming up in about 5 weeks. Columbus representatives include the mayor and 1 councilor. So we just wanted to bring that information to you, and also specifically about the T-Splost to let you know that that process for the River Valley has been initiated, and we'll have to participate in that process as well.
And we'll probably at the next meeting on the 13th ask you to vote for a representative of council to go to the roundtable on September 4th at Buena Vista. But we'll send you some information out about that, and we'll keep you posted. Councilor Crabb?
Thank you. I notice here that the SPLOST, it says up to 1% sales tax. Is there a possibility that we coordinate it to where the school and the city government split that 1 cent or 1% instead of it all going one place or another? Have we discussed that?
I think there's multiple answers to that. I think certainly we could ask for 0.5% through our SPLOST. The challenge there is the amount of money it would raise would probably be just enough to cover the government center. Mm-hmm. And as we have heard and you have heard from constituents, that there are a lot of infrastructure issues within our county that we desperately need to address. And frankly, I haven't gotten out in front of this thing, but my intention would be to go to the public with items that are basic, not build any more stuff. We got enough stuff. Look at either replacing things that we have that are falling down around our ears, or shore them up to make them usable for the citizens of this community. I think the challenge in doing that would be that it would not generate, even at it, if we get that full penny, it wouldn't generate enough to cover all of the things that we desperately need to do. But it would allow us to, whether it's vehicle purchases, whether it's capital investment in shoring up some of our facilities that are now 28 to 30 years old, whether it's resurfacing roads, whatever it is, it would give us the flexibility to listen to the public and then craft that list and then go back out to them again, make sure we heard them correct. And I think I won't presume to speak for the school board, but I would imagine their concerns would be similar, and that is that it would not truly meet some of the things on their radar screen right now.
So,
I was just going to mention the.
go ahead.
The other thing that I've passed out to you, it's just a one-page summary of all the sales tax rates throughout the state of Georgia. There are 86 counties within Georgia that have 8%, 67 that have 7%, and there are some, Fulton actually has 2 counties, whether you're in Atlanta versus not in Atlanta. DeKalb is the same way. They're up at 8.9% in Atlanta. We did check with Phoenix City within the city limits. They're at 9.5%. Outside the city limits at 8.75%. So our 7-8% where we're currently at is within the range of the other counties throughout the state of Georgia, and there are some that are up to 9%. There is one at 9% throughout the state. So I just wanted to provide that information to you as far as sales tax throughout the state as well as in Muskogee County.
And I have to correct something I misspoke on. I was under the impression that we could go after 0.5% and the school district go, we can't, not unless legislation is changed. So apparently we can't do that. I was under the same impression you were. Sorry.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, if there are no additional questions related to sales tax, that will conclude the presentations on government center planning, the government center options, and sales tax funding options. And I hope that the sales tax piece was helpful. I thought it might be helpful for mayor and council and for the public if we post this, because we get asked the questions all the time, why can't you pay police officers with the T-SPLOS? Well, there's a reason. So we wanted to just kind of educate people on this.
This will be handy for, I think, all the councilors to keep in their car if they ever have to answer those questions. Council Thomas?
I was going to ask Mr. City Manager if we could make sure that all of these PowerPoint presentations are uploaded so that we can direct citizens that call and ask us questions where they can find them to
Yes, ma'am.
to help to clarify. So if we could do that, that would be helpful.
We'll certainly get that done.
Thank you.
Today. And so I've got the HR director present. We're going to talk about Health and Wellness Center. And we've got some guests here actually with us. Wendy White, Director of Planning and Clinical Services, CARE ATC. And I was thinking our HR director was around here somewhere, but I don't see her.
She's coming.
And
We met
so,
with her yesterday.
our HR director, Aretha Hollowell, will make opening comments and present our guests.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager, Mayor and Council. We wanted to have our Health and Wellness Center vendor, CARE ATC, come and just speak with you briefly and provide a update on the Health and Wellness Center. We met with the Healthcare Task Force, the Council Healthcare Task Force, earlier this year in February, it was April time frame, and provided a detailed update on the Health and Wellness Center. Specifically, they provided a deep dive of a lot of the outcomes of the Health and Wellness Center and a lot of the work that has been done there. I'm really excited about what CARE ATC has done in terms of guiding us with the assistance of our benefit consultant, Shaw Hankins, in a very positive direction with our employees in terms of preventive health care. So I'm really excited to have her come. I know the hour has gotten late, and she's provided a handout for you, and I know she's going to be brief with that. But I do want you all and for everybody watching to get a good analysis of what is actually going on at the Health and Wellness Center. And it's something that we can look at with pride in terms of the investments that we've made at the Health and Wellness Center. The news is positive, and it continues to be positive. I'm real excited about what is happening at the Health and Wellness Center. I continue to receive very positive feedback from patients, from those participating in the Health and Wellness Center. The news is very, very good. And I think we have a good partnership with CARE-ATC in that when things do arise at the Health and Wellness Center, they really work with us from a partnership standpoint in resolving those issues. So I think that's something that we can feel real, real good about it. But I do, we have Wendy White, representative with CARE-ATC. She's going to talk with you in more detail about some of the good things that are happening at the Health and Wellness Center, and she's provided a handout for you today. So I'm really glad to have her here and be able to provide this presentation to you, and certainly she'll be able to answer any questions that you might have as well. Wendy?
Thank you, Rether. As Rether said, I did present the full report in April of 2019 at the Health Care Task Force meeting. So in the interest of time today, I wanted to provide you the full report for anyone who didn't have the benefit of reviewing it previously. But I've flagged just 8 pages within the report to save a little bit of time today, and I think that it provides the greatest highlight of the overall program that CARE-ATC is administering on behalf of Columbus Consolidated Government. In addition, we recently participated with the city's program to create a video promoting the services of the Health and Wellness Center. And so we're excited to see the many ways that we do our outreach to the patients and that we're able to accomplish a positive message out there regarding the benefits that are available to the patients. Just by way of history, CARE-ATC became a part of the Health and Wellness Center program in June of 2016. So our first full year of services was in 2017. This is the full year 2018 report of services. And so there is one particular slide in here that maybe appears like there wasn't a whole lot of utilization and activity in 2016, but it's only a partial year. So I just wanted to point that out. There were major plan design changes in 2018, as many of you are aware, that resulted in a larger population being eligible to use the Health and Wellness Center. So if you'll turn in your presentation to the first tab, it is actually the clinic utilization summary. You're able to see that you had a total number of visits in 2018 at the Health and Wellness Center of 8,177. Those are healthcare provider visits. Those do not count the individual lab appointments or patients coming in just for their medication refill pickups. This is actual healthcare provider visits. That is 1,073 more visits than the prior year. So there was definitely an increase. Another area that I wanted to bring to your attention is the overall no-show rate of 5% is significant in that it was a decrease of 58% over 2017, where we worked with Rether's team to develop a no-show policy and get that communicated to the masses and really send the message of the courtesy of canceling your appointment to make that appointment time available to other patients. So we saw a great success with that. 46% of the visits in 2018 were acute services, things that popped up overnight or needed to be seen within a day or two, and the remainder of the visits are related to chronic condition and preventive care. So the next slide that we have here is the member engagement. Just wanted to highlight, if you look down in the bottom right corner here, you see it looks like 3 little pills, lines of pills, patient utilization. So 23% of the patients who visited the Health and Wellness Center in 2018 had only 1 visit. 18% had 2, and 59% of the patients had 3 or more visits. The reason that this is impactful is it means that the people who are using the Health and Wellness Center are engaged enough to come back. They're engaging in care, they're engaging in their health care, and later in the program I'll be able to show you some of the outcomes related to those patients who have that continuous engagement with Carey TC. The next tab, actually I'll have to jump ahead here in the slideshow that's on the screen, is the Net Promoter Score. So Carey TC has worked together with John Redmond, the city auditor, to come up with multiple methods of patient feedback opportunities. Patients are currently offered an iPad upon exit of their visit to just answer a few questions regarding their experience, and we're capturing that information. In addition, we send the patients an email asking them a simple question: how likely are you to recommend Carey TC to a family member or a coworker? And then they rate their experience on a scale of 1 to 10. We had 888 total responses in 2018. 745 patients scored Carey TC a 9 or a 10 out of 10. So I think that's very significant. The next page, or the next tabbed page, relates to the health screenings that we do on an annual basis. And as you are aware, with the health plan changes in 2018, it incentivized the patients to go through the health screening process, whether or not they were utilizing the services of the Health and Wellness Center, and that was tied directly to their cost of premium. With that plan design change, there was a 263% increase in utilization of the health screenings in 2018. We fully expect that number to remain very high and to increase this year as well. We've been working diligently with Reuther's team to plan out those events in the fall and to make it as convenient and accessible to the employees and the spouses as possible. The next slide that I have is 3 circles here, and it's related to Carey TC risk stratification. So it's the pie charts page. This pie chart page really is, when you just look at it at a glance and you see red, yellow, and green, it doesn't necessarily show a significant impact. Risk stratification comes along after the health screening takes place. We then look at the overall risk of the population, de-identified of course, but we're able to narrow down then what conditions need the most attention in the Health and Wellness Center, in the services that we're recommending through Shaw Hankins and through Reuther's team. In addition to that, how we administer the individual health coaching program. So I want to draw your attention to the graph that's for 2016 and then the graph that is for 2018. If you look in 2016, when we initially assumed and had then a very small population participating in the health screenings, the high risk of that population was 8.33%, moderate risk 60.68%, and low risk was 30.98%. By the time we did the risk stratification for the results of last year's health screenings, it resulted in an overall reduction. Your high risk is now at 5.42%. Your low risk increased by almost 10%. 10% of the population that continued to do these health screenings had a decrease into the green, meaning that they were no longer at risk for their disease. And I think that that is a very impactful statement. So we're going to move on to the next slide, which far and away I think is for me, if you had to throw one slide on the screen and present it to council, I think this is probably the one that we would want to use. The year-over-year coaching score improvement details at the top of the page. It's the one with the arrows at the top of the page here. We had, the health coaching program went into effect in 2017. We had individual one-to-one health coaching options for patients. They do come into the Health and Wellness Center for their care. They also have the option of doing video-based services if they're at a greater distance, or perhaps someone is unable to take the time to come into the Health and Wellness Center. We had, of those returning participants who did the year-over-year coaching services both years, we saw a 47% improvement in BMI. Weight is the hardest area to have overall improvement, and 47% of those participants had a decrease in their BMI. Their diabetes results, 58% of the participants improved their A1C. Blood pressure, 54%. HDL cholesterol, which is actually the good cholesterol, 38% still improved their results, 59% though on the bad cholesterol. I think this is really an impactful slide to show such a significant improvement. You're not just talking about one or two individuals, you're talking about a group of people who's found value in the services and continued to engage in those services. They become the success stories that lead to the next round of patients. So it's a continuous cycle of refinement with their health. They're showing that improvement, but they're also setting a great example to their coworkers and to their spouses. The next slide I have talks a little bit about productivity, and really it's a hard thing to measure. It's the purple slide here. It's a little bit harder thing to measure, but we estimate across our book of business that with the convenience and the location of the Health and Wellness Center, approximately 1 hour of work is lost by employees. I'm so sorry to advance the slide. Approximately 1 hour is lost in their workday by coming over to the Health and Wellness Center for their care. If they have to have that same care on Main Street, they sometimes have to take a half day. If they have to travel outside of the area, even a full day of work off of work in order to obtain those services. So we estimated that as an average of 4 hours away from work for any Main Street care that is on the traditional health plan. That results, using the average hourly wage of the employees at Columbus Consolidated Government, results in an estimated savings of $442,000 just in lost productivity. And finally, the last item that I wanted to highlight for discussion is the financial health impact slide at the end. And I put that arrow right in the middle of the page to show you, referencing back to the slide that I talked about, the 53% decrease in blood pressure results for those patients that were engaged. According to these statistics, a 12 to 13 point reduction in systolic blood pressure can reduce heart attack risk by 21%. In addition to the individual and family devastation, heart attack costs $78,221 in the first 90 days of care. You had 87 patients who had a decline in their point reduction of 12 to 13%, which resulted in an overall cost savings of $1.4 million. So it's difficult to measure these types of savings because the claims are no longer occurring, but I think that it's very impactful to remember that the prevention, the approach to care, increasing the health screening so that we now can identify the risks of the population and we can begin to target those conditions are all ways that lead to that overall savings in the end. So I really commend Columbus Consolidated Government for your efforts to make improvements to the program, to add services, and to follow the guidance of not only Carrie TC, but Shaw Hankins in making decisions regarding the benefits. So that concludes my summary of the services. We do have the full report. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have related to the Health and Wellness Center.
Doesn't appear to be any, but thank you for what you do. This is great news. I mean, it's great news, obviously, from a cost containment standpoint, but even more than that, it's great news because we're, through y'all, are innovating in ways to keep our employees healthy. Yes. And prolong their time with their families, let them lead better lives, and the fact that they're accepting of this and taking advantage of this is just outstanding.
Yeah.
So thank you for your efforts on that. And Retha, thank you and what your team has done to that end.
Thank you for your time.
And so thank you as well. And Mayor and Council, we want to continue to provide updates to you regarding the Health and Wellness Center. The mayor has said it's great for our employees and for this government. And we see over the years that we've operated the Health and Wellness Center, the savings to the government and taxpayers as a result. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The final update, Mayor and Council, is the Muscogee County Jail maintenance. You keep hearing we had lower water pressure this weekend. Columbus Water Works, they were doing some work, and we've had shower issues and floor issues and just generator issues and different things with the jail. And we kind of wanted to update you on what's going on at the jail. And Director Pat Biegler is here to do that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just to give you some background, of course, the jail was built in 2 stages, one part of the building in '84 and the other part in 2002. Altogether, we're looking at about 172,000 square foot. As you know, I came and did a report card. We've done an assessment of buildings, and the jail building has assessed at a D for the entire building. And that means it's got some system failures, more than one system failure going on. We've now started evaluating each of the different systems within the building. This is a sample because the jail was one of the first we did. The AC system actually has 27 units total in that building and 2 chillers. And because of the R22 issues, I would rate that definitely as an F. They're all older, they all have problems. The roof is about a B. We're keeping a close eye on that, and we haven't been having any major issues. The generator, brand new, it was completed last month, and is fully functioning and doing well. The facade of the building, we have some bricks that are failing, and we've had that, engineering has done an evaluation of that, and it's in an area where the public is not threatened, but we're keeping an eye on that too. Plumbing and piping is starting to show some issues. That's an F. Electrical, not bad. The systems are starting to get overloaded because, as you know, we keep adding all kinds of things that need to be we need electric for. We give that a C at this time. The interior finishes, the inmates are pretty rough on the building. Those constantly need to be worked on, and we do that, but I would give that an F too. The heating is all electric, and at some point, we're not having major problems, but as you know, it's expensive and it's tricky, and at some point, we need to look at replacing that. We've done some work on the hot water tanks for the jail, but we have 2 very large stainless steel tanks for the inmate showers, et cetera, hot water, and those are both starting to show some minor leaks, so we're going to have to look closely at that. And the elevators are functioning well. They're ugly, but they are functioning well, so I would give that a C. Just to put things in focus, facilities management has about 24 people who actually turn wrenches for all the 600 to 700 occupied buildings we have. We actually have 4 people assigned to the jail full-time, a supervisor who is also a craftsman and does a lot of work. He's not just a supervisor. HVAC, electric, and a plumber. And the plumber's position is one of the 3 vacancies we have right now out of the 4 that we have for the city. MCP only has 1 permanent person, and after we finish looking at the jail, we need to start looking at MCP because it's starting to age and show some wear and tear. And as you know, we've got 4 people in the government center, and not a plumber, unfortunately, but we do keep 4 people over there full-time. Recent issues, we've had a number of them. The low water pressure was actually a waterworks water main break issue. They were still working on it yesterday. The air conditioner, we've been very concerned about. The main part of the building, there are 4 very large units, and it has reached the point now where the compressors, 1 or 2 go down every summer. We've had 1 down this summer, and luckily we were able to rebuild and replace on one of the 4 units, the compressor. They've been rebuilt 12 to 14, 15 times, and we're running out of luck. Let's just say that, we're running out of luck with those. As I briefed you prior, we have R22 in most of the AC units, many of them in the city, 281, I think. Included in that were all of the air conditioners at the jail. They all have R22, and that is a chunk of money. We'll be using some of our facilities infrastructure money to take care of some of those, and we've already replaced 3 or 4 around the city. We've had issues with hot water in the laundry. Those issues have been taken care of. We have had issues with the kitchen floor, and that has been replaced. They have had major issues with the showers leaking and not being properly sealed. That project is going on right now and has been funded. And we had a couple of electrical issues that generally had to do with the work we were doing on the generator replacement. And those were planned shutdowns, but they still disrupt life if you don't have as much electric as you generally need. Current projects, the showers, funded through the CIP. Engineering is working this project. The generator replacement just went in last month. You approved that in the budget a year or two ago. In our facilities infrastructure funding for this year, we identified 4 smaller air conditioning units that were leaking sufficiently that we needed to go ahead and we'll be with replacement, and we'll be starting those in early September. That's going to be about $120,000 out of our infrastructure funds. And then the 4 large units are the ones that of most concern. We've got a design underway using facility infrastructure funding. We will be getting a design back in early to mid-August. This will require that we shut down the air conditioner through the winter months. And for that reason, timing is getting to be very critical. Estimated cost is $1 million, and finance is looking at funding right now. So we'll keep moving forward with that.
Excuse me, Pat.
Yes.
Counselor Thomas.
Ms. Bigler, you said the generator has just been replaced in last month, but that it was authorized some time ago?
Yes.
What was the holdup?
Going through the procurement, the design process, the procurement process, the installation process, and they had to build it. So it's been an ongoing project for several months.
Several months?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said several years.
No, I probably misspoke. No,
Oh,
several
because
months.
I was going to say that.
I think it was in last year's budget. Yes, I'm getting nods from
Okay.
there. So it was in last year's budget, we moved forward with it, and we actually did the final testing and inspection last month.
Well, and let me just say too, in the government center, in the jail, the buildings are old, and when something breaks, it is, it's a real, I'm trying to find the right word, it's a challenge, because we've got to do a search all over the world to find a part, and it's, they don't make the part, and you got to find someone to design it and create it. And when I hear the stories, I'm baffled, but you just can't call them up and order it. And so that's part of what they go through, and so it's a real challenge for a generator, or we had one recently in the government center. They call it a refrigerator or whatever it was down
Cooling tower?
down in the basement.
I think they referred to it as that. That was the uninterrupted power source UPS.
Yes,
And
they had to build it in Texas, and it took all this time, and then the cost is crazy, and then I think it was going to be like, I'll just say $60,000 to do it, but they would rent you one until they built one for $30,000. And we said, no, we're going to take our chance, because we knew that, because in other words, we didn't have a backup. It was down and we didn't have a backup. And so I took the risk of going until they built the new one, and if we had gone down, we would have been shutdown because I was trying to figure, how do you pay $60,000 for them to build this new one, but they'll rent you a temporary one for 30 days for $30,000. And so it's that kind of stuff going on that some of it you don't know about that drives staff, maintenance, and people crazy. But I just wanted you to know that they don't make, like, the fan that broke. And you couldn't buy one.
No.
You had to, I don't know what they did, but they had to create something.
If we had followed the traditional path, we would have had to have one handmade, piece by piece, and then we would have had to actually get a crane that goes up, take part of the roof off. There isn't even room to remove the fan out of that unit without taking the roof off and craning it out. So our guys got in there, and it took them quite a bit of time, but they were able to reconstruct inside the machinery the fan that blew up.
So you don't get to hear those stories, because I don't come and tell you about every story like that, but it's, you know, some people ask, what keeps you up at night? The building will keep you up at night, so I just want you to know that. So, but anyway, when you ask that question, I just wanted to share with you that there are some nightmare situations that, and the jail is the same way. They just don't manufacture the part anymore. But Mayor, I just wanted to say that.
Okay, Councilor Davis?
The jail would be ran by the sheriff's office, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
So all that would be in there, but what kind of, in their budget, how much do they line item for these kind of items? I know some of these you can't see. I mean, if it happens, it's just, it's emergency, but how much do they keep on an annual,
It's
yearly basis?
It's actually a facility maintenance budget, because they maintain all these buildings. We have more buildings, and when you say however many buildings we have, you're talking about every restroom and a park, standalone just buildings. But to answer his question, would you respond to that about how you maintain all of these buildings? Is it all in your budget?
It's all in our budget.
How much do you earmark for this, for the jail?
We simply don't have that kind of money. It has to come back to council for special funding. I
Are you
received
saying zero?
zero. If you're talking about everything in the jail, no. We have the 4 personnel there. There's, I believe...
I'm not talking about labor, I'm talking about just, you know, like a reserve, a capital
Contingency.
replacement
There's no
reserve or anything.
capital replacement. I have, this fiscal year, I have $750,000 in infrastructure, facilities infrastructure money, and that has to serve for every single building I have.
And
So
name those-
generally, I
which-
try
How many
to-
buildings?
I'm sorry?
How many buildings?
Around 650 that are occupied,
gosh.
1,100 structures that are actually qualify as buildings.
Well, and I want the finance director to...
Well, and I'm
The general fund
I guess, yes, that's what I was
maintenance
fixing
money,
to go.
that's what I
is,
want her to...
We rely on that reserve so much, and it just goes to show that we need to continue building that reserve as much as possible.
Well, and it points to, Counselor, the inability to be proactive. When you don't have money, you're reacting to what breaks rather than being proactive, and it's a matter of funding. But
No, I know there's a lot of moving parts, but I mean, it just goes to show you that it's furthermore reason that you got to continue to build the fund balance.
oh, I don't disagree with that, but, you know, yes, sir. But you were making a point about general fund.
Good morning. Yes, also within Public Works budget in the general fund for other repairs and maintenance, it's about 1.1, almost 1.2 million that's in that repair and maintenance budget that Public Works utilizes for parks and recreation facilities, government buildings, and public safety facilities. And I do believe, and Director Beaver can attest to this, about more than half of that money is utilized on public safety facilities.
Yes, definitely more than half. And if you think about everything from buying toilet paper to light bulbs to what have you, 1.2 million for that many facilities and that larger facilities does not begin to cover all of the needs we have out there.
And so if something broke on the Riverwalk, that you got to use some of that money
I would use
for
some of that money.
Riverwalk. So
Yes.
someone tells you the rails are broken at this location on the Riverwalk. Well, you know, we don't have a budget, a maintenance budget for Riverwalk. It comes out of that pot of money. So, you know, we got to go down and repair rails. And so they're stretched with personnel and they're stretched with maintenance monies to keep these things.
So with the two, that's 1,819 total?
Yes.
So you can, for this whole city government, you know,
And then also,
buildings and things, it's a challenge. And, you know, and so I just really want to highlight, you know, some things you never, you know, I'll come tell you that they don't make that big fan that's as large as as the ceiling is round, and you can't just go and buy it off the shelf. And even if you could buy it, you can't get it out of the building because it's the way the building is constructed. You know, you can get up there and break it piece by piece and try and, but you have to have a crane to get a new one up. So they have a lot to deal with. You can continue on, but I just wanted to have a commercial break.
in spite of the limited funding, I will say that, you know, facilities tries really, really hard to be as proactive as we can. Since about 2012, in 2012, we didn't even have an inventory. We didn't know what we had. So we spent about 3 years inventorying all the facilities and trying to put together, and then we followed that with an assessment, which was required for our accreditation. And as we go, we're identifying the R22 units and the roofs that need to be repaired, and we're trying to take care of them before they get too bad and before they do other damage. Because if you know, if you let things go. If you've got a bad roof and it leaks and leaks and leaks, the damage inside starts to get worse and worse. So you get a lot of deterioration. We have looked closely at the jail. We still have 18 other AC units with R22 coolant that are going to have to be replaced in the next couple of years, I'd say, if that were at all possible. The plumbing is just beginning to experience small leaks, pinhole leaks, and we're starting to have little leaks pop up. I had one in the lobby a couple of weeks ago, and it's, you know, we need to, now we're seeing those signs, we need to evaluate what it's going to take to fix that and put a cost estimate on it, rather than waiting to the point where we have major flooding going on. We have 2 very large hot water tanks. They're stainless steel. They're starting to leak, and that's going to be about $100,000. And the electric heating needs to be looked at very closely, and we need to do an estimate for that. So we're going to get the costs, we're going to evaluate what needs to be done, we're going to try to prioritize those and keep coming back and talking about what money we need, because some of those just cannot come out of that 750. We only started in Public Works receiving facilities infrastructure money about 4 years ago, and prior to that, we didn't even have, other than just the routine maintenance money, we did not have anything for projects. So this is allowing us to start taking care of a few things here and there, and it also allows us not to scramble madly for emergency funds if an air conditioning goes down. We just took care of the emergency, the air conditioning at Parks and Rec office. It failed in the middle of April, May. It's hotter than all blazes. We were able to replace that almost immediately. Haygood Gym, we're getting ready to replace the air conditioner. So we're utilizing those funds, and we have 2 or 3 projects with cooling towers, et cetera, in the government center. We're spending that money on those things. So we're going to keep analyzing, keep putting together lists, and keep talking about costs so that you have a better idea of what we're up against, and you can start looking for what we need to do next to start dealing with some of this. Any questions?
Counselor Davis.
Yeah, I do. Mr. City Manager, what are we doing if we know these things, and whether they happen in a year, 2, 3, they could go out at any time, but if we know that today, are we squirreling, for lack of a better term, squirreling money away in something that would be there and to deal with this issue instead of budgeting it every year and it's gone, then we have to go into the fund balance? Are we doing anything like that?
Well, my response is you got to have something to squirrel away to squirrel it away.
If we didn't.
Well, we have money in the fund balance today, but you'd have to earmark it.
Yes, and we could certainly earmark it, or we can call on the fund balance reserve when an emergency occurs. I think we all know that we've got to build up the fund reserve without OLOS. And so we got to, it used to be no OLOS, and we had 90 days, what have you, and then the OLOS came in, and the OLOS is more than the old, the reserve, and we got to move it back the opposite direction, and that's our goal. Mayor, we've talked about it, and we've focused on that, and so.
Maybe that's something y'all can discuss about putting a little bit aside, so when budget time comes, that money's aside, you're not budgeting that money or using it, or it's not going to be used by decisions during the budget process that get us back to 60 days. The challenge has always been, we've always been up against that 60-day mark, and there's really, you shun the thought of having an emergency. Where is that going to come from, but there's a little bit of money in the fund balance now, and maybe, hopefully, later, so maybe start putting some of that aside, but.
Well, but there's a little bit of money in fund balance with reliance on OLOS.
Right. Well, I'm just talking about things that is coming down the road.
I got
she's telling us, yeah.
But that's a conversation, a discussion we need to have.
Yep, and I can tell you that I don't know how much we'll move the needle, but one of the big focuses of mine, and I'm going to be presenting to council through the different budgets that we drop in front of you, is to correct that balance, in my opinion. Start getting a greater percentage of the fund balance being reflected in the general fund balance than in the OLOS fund balance. And we're starting, and we are going to start, and I welcome any calls or suggestions from council. We're going to start sort of preliminarily doing our budget in August. And that represents about a 4 or 5 month head start on what we've done in the past. And the specific objective is to do more strategizing, taking a look at some of these challenges that the department heads tell us about every year. I heard about them when I was on council. We just didn't have enough fingers to plug the holes in the dike. And now in the mayor's office, I see firsthand the challenges. They still come and ask for them. Pat asked for grab-alls and trucks, and wasn't doable based on the revenues that we had coming in projected. So they tell us, and we tend to look at them and say, can you make it another year? And the answer is yeah, as long as everything is smooth and things hold together and we don't have, and then as you pointed out, when there is an unforeseen occurrence, whatever it is, whether it's a natural disaster or whether it's just a large piece of equipment wearing out in one of our facilities, then we scramble.
Well, I'd like to dovetail to another question. Mr. City Attorney, can you do a reserve or a capital replacement with a SPLOST? Can you do that within the
No, it's
money
only for
generated,
projects.
the revenue generated?
The money is only for projects that are defined.
For projects.
they'd have to be defined as a true capital investment.
Yeah,
So
it
we'd have
would be for maintenance and capital replacement and a reserve to deal with the projects that you
Well,
build or the projects you have to do.
Not for maintenance, and.
You cannot do that.
Cannot, no.
But what we are going to do, you bring up a good point, we are going to bring to you, ask you to sponsor and
Right.
support a resolution to send to our legislative delegation. Representative Richard Smith had earlier tried to require that there be a certain percentage of SPLOST monies earned be set aside for maintenance, which does take legislative approval because that would be, under the current law, that's not allowed. But we're going to ask them to revisit that and allow us to proactively set some of this, if we're awarded a SPLOST, to set some of the money aside for maintenance of the things we're revitalizing.
Right.
This go-round.
I think that's great to put on
So
the
we-
legislative wish list or whatever, but, I mean, that's how it's done in private sector, 3-4% on average for reserve, capital replacements. I mean, banks somewhat require that. If not, they do require that. That'd be great if we could do that. I think some of the concerns in the past with the SPLOST was that you didn't have enough money to maintain the stuff that gets old. And
Right.
I said it earlier, stuff deteriorates. You can't stop that. It gets old. And you got to upgrade it or renovate it and get it back to where it needs to be. Everybody has to do that. If you're a business
It's
or
no
not-
different than your own house.
No, it's
Your
it's
house
not.
is going to
It's just,
get old.
It's just a matter of time, but you can plan and prepare with, and that's what they do in the private sector, is basically what you're talking about, Mayor. I hope the state really looks at that, because it would help.
And Mayor, the finance director just pointed out, I think Director Biegler pointed out that the air condition at the jail has to be replaced, and they're going to be doing that fairly soon. But we are going to be coming back to you on the agenda to use 2 days of reserve. I think it's about $1 million, because there is no funding source to take care of the AC at the jail, and it has to be done. So there again, it's.
Mr. City Attorney, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up. It took me a minute to pull it up, but the first part of the capital outlay project definition talks about land and structures such as would be properly chargeable to a capital asset account and as distinguished from current expenditures and ordinary maintenance. So you can't use it for that. And then they define courthouses and different buildings that you have to use it for.
So it's strictly brick and mortar, but you
Right.
couldn't use it as a reserve.
Not unless they change the statute to allow some kind of set aside.
All right.
Well, that would be from the citizen's perspective, I think that would be very relieving, because you hear that a lot. I mean, that was one of the concerns of the past. You learn from the past, you learn from history. I mean, where we're at today, and you hear it, so let's problem solve.
All right, thank you, sir. Councilor Crabb?
So I want some clarification here. So could a SPLOST pay for the air conditioning systems to be replaced?
No, that would be
That's-
considered maintenance.
That's considered maintenance,
Yes.
even if they have to be updated? I mean, because we're updating them from an R22 to what's common now, and I can't remember what that is. Or is R22 the updated version?
No, R22 is the old coolant, and don't quote me, I think there's a heat exchanger system we'll be going to.
Okay, so by replacing our air conditioning system in the jail, we're spending $1 million, but in turn, we're probably going to see some savings in our electric bill each month.
We should be seeing some savings, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And again, it's maintenance that we can't
Okay.
do. And that's where the mayor is talking about. If that happened through legislation, we could do that.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, that concludes city manager's agenda.
All right. Any other questions or concern by council? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. I don't know. We're adjourned.
Welcome to CCG TV, the Keep Columbus Beautiful Earth Notes. Thank you all for tuning in. And for those of you all who are tuning in for the very first time, our mission at Keep Columbus Beautiful is to engage and educate individuals to be better stewards to our environment. And we have a wonderful program for you all today. We need to make sure that you know that you are an important person to making sure that we're taking care of our environment. Because it's not about having a fun time in our environment. It's about making sure that we are able to live. So we need to have clean air, clean water, good vegetations, and you need to help us make sure that we can have an environment that we can grow, our grandchildren can grow and can improve on or enjoy. We just need for you all to support our programs and make sure that if you are not recycling, we'd love for you to start today. Just call 311, give them your name, your address. They'll bring a recycling bin to your home and tell you everything that you need to know to start recycling. And if you see any infractions on the environment, if there are potholes or tall grass or junk cars or houses that need to have a little attention, call 311 and report it. Then that way we can address it. Just remember that we are, as human beings, individuals. We are the eyes, the ears, the mouth, and the hands, and the toes for our environment. So it's important for us to make sure that we take care of what gives us life and not quality of life. So thank you for tuning in. I have two wonderful guests, and I know you're going to get a lot of information, things that you all can participate in, that we need for you to participate in. They're going to talk about some projects that's coming up, and we're going to need for you all to support it. Gwen Russell, thank you for coming and being on our set.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Gwen Russell, and my title at Columbus Waterworks is Corporate Relations Specialist, and part of my job is planning our corporate and community events.
Okay, wonderful. And Adrian,
yes.
How long have you been at Columbus
I have
Waterworks?
been with the Waterworks for just over 13 years, and currently I'm also a corporate relations specialist.
Okay.
However, my role pertains more to external communications and social media and website and promotions.
Well, Keep Columbus Beautiful is a wonderful partner of Columbus Waterworks, and
Yes,
I have,
yes.
since 1999, since I was here, we have just enjoyed a wonderful business relationship, and
Yes.
William has done an outstanding job as chairing Keep Columbus Beautiful, and then, you know, we work together with Help the Hooch.
Yes.
And so it's just so important to have those business relationships, and it's important to have people like you all, because you plan special things. And this, our show really is to give people out in our community information that will help them to grow to be good stewards. And, you know, we can't live without that good quality of water that you have. I was at Columbus State University for Leadership Columbus, and one of the participants there was saying that, you know, she has this filter. And she said, I just want to tell you all, if you know anybody from Columbus Waterworks, that they are doing an outstanding job. She said, she said, I had to take my filter off because the water is so good. And I thought that was a great commercial. So I'm doing a commercial for Columbus Waterworks
Well,
right
we
now.
appreciate that.
All right, good. So tell us, Gwen, what's coming up?
Well, what's coming up, the date is August 10th,
Okay.
and the time is 10 a.m. until 2 o'clock p.m. It's going to be our upcoming grease recycling and pharmaceuticals disposable events, and there will be 2 locations.
Okay.
The main location, or the first location, will be, as a matter of fact, it's our first time at our location, Columbus Waterworks main office, located at 1421 Veterans Parkway. We will be there in the customer's parking lot,
Okay.
collecting old pharmaceuticals or unused or expired pharmaceuticals. The Muskogee County Sheriff's Department will be there because we partnered with them in this event as well.
Right.
And Also, the other location is going to be at the big parking lot at 5300 Sidney Simons Boulevard.
Yeah, but that's over in the landing.
Over in the landing, and
Right.
at same time, 10
Right.
a.m. until 2 o'clock p.m.
Right.
And if you all don't know where Columbus Waterworks downtown, if you know where McDonald's is, you just right across the
Across the
street.
street.
Yeah, and so I know we're looking for a lot of people to come out. It's so important for us to recycle that grease and get
Yes.
those pharmaceuticals, over-the-counter drugs and prescriptions or whatever, get those things out of our main water stream.
Exactly.
And really make sure that we are disposing of them properly.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes,
so
that's
tell us a
correct.
little bit, Adrian, about what's going on too.
Well, that is our biggest program that we have coming up, and once we get the grease and pharmaceuticals recycling program out of the way, or finished, I should say, then we were going to be working heavily with, actually Keep Columbus Beautiful on our Help the Hooch efforts. I know you guys
Wonderful.
have some things coming up with that we're
Right.
already starting to get our things together with. But one thing I do want to mention is if you're busy on August 10th and you're out of town or you can't attend, we also have 11 different stationary sites set up throughout town to where you can bring it any time of the day. So if you're one of those people that you work, third shift, or you get off of work in the middle of the night and you've got all this, you need to drop it off, you can take it to one of these locations and leave your cooking grease in an old oil container or any kind of a
Right.
container, and we will dispose of that through our recycling.
And so why is it important for us to recycle that grease? Many years ago, I remember my mom used to have like a little container set right in the center of the stove, and every time she fried bacon or whatever she was frying, we would keep the grease and use it over. I found out over the years now that it's not good to reuse that grease.
Right.
So what does Columbus Waterworks do with the grease that you collect?
Well, what we do with the grease is we actually have a program that is, we actually patented the technology and shared it with other utilities to use as well. But we recycle that through a very complicated digestive process, and it actually will create methane gas that runs through a generator. And that gas is then used to offset the electrical needs and other energy needs to run the plant, thereby saving money for all of our citizens.
Awesome. And then it's
So-
not clogging up those
Yeah,
pipes.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's very expensive on the homeowners and as
Right.
well as with Columbus Waterworks.
Yeah. And you know what? You can see that. I remember too, people would always say, well, just turn the hot water on.
Yes.
And then it'll just run on straight through. And that is not true,
No,
right?
it not.
Gels, it gels and
It
it gets clogged, and then sometimes it bags up into the bathtub, your sink in the bathroom, your sink in the kitchen.
Right.
And it could cost you a lot of
Lot of money to
lots of
take
money,
care
yes,
of, right.
a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's why I'm putting emphasis on lots.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And a lot of people don't realize that, because my mom used to always say, well, just put some hot water through it. You put it
Yeah.
on it, it'll be out of the way. Well, what you're ending up doing is if everyone on your street does that and uses that same principle,
Right.
all of the houses on that street share the same line coming out from your neighborhood.
Right.
So what you're ending up doing is you're taking all of that cooking grease that will solidify, like if you leave it in a bowl or something on
And
your
if it
counter.
gets cold.
It will do that,
Yes.
it'll just do it further down, and so then every house off of that connection will have backup issues, and it can be
Yes.
very, very expensive, not just for us, but then also for you as a
Yes.
homeowner. So,
And also too, it just causes a whole lot of issues.
Yes.
Yes, it
And
does.
all we have to do is properly dispose of it. And I know that most of the time, people do better when they know better.
Exactly.
Yes.
So having opportunities to come on our show to talk about those things that you're doing will educate them so that they can be better stewards to our environment.
Definitely.
Because sometimes we don't think about, the grease and what effects it'll have as it's making its way back through the channels.
Exactly.
And it's important for us to do that. So you all please make sure that you're not flushing or putting your grease down this drain of any one of your sinks. And then also plan to come out on August the 10th from 10 until 2, 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. And we'll be at the parking lots at Big Lots over in the Landing and also downtown on Veterans.
Yes.
Right across from the McDonald's. And so we need for you all to come out and encourage other people in your sphere, that's under your sphere of influence. And encourage them to come down and bring their grease products too. It's important. As well as those drugs, you know, I tell you.
Yes.
Because so many people take, well, really don't know that they don't need to flush drugs down our commode.
Yes.
And so, but it does, it cause a lot of problems, not only just for the water, but for the wildlife.
Exactly.
Right. And so we want to make sure that we always have some good, clean drinking water.
Yes.
And I understand, you know, Columbus Waterworks want to encourage you to use bottles over and over again instead of buying bottled water.
Right.
Because it's better to have just your container and get your water out of tap.
Right.
Yes.
You know, because we have 100% pure, good water.
Yes, we do.
And so we encourage everyone to make sure that you, you know, take your little container where you can just fill it up over and over again and not create a whole lot of trash or recyclable things. So, but if you have to use a bottle, make sure that you all are recycling those.
Because water is the fuel of life.
It
Definitely
absolutely is. You know, we always say that Chattahoochee River really is the lifeline
It
for
is.
all of us here.
It
We
is.
depend on it 100% for everything that we do in our homes. You know, whether it's taking a bath, whether it's cooking,
Yes.
we're dependent on that water, the water from the Chattahoochee to help us or to be there to give us life.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
the 11 stationary sites are on our website. That's on the first
Okay.
page of our website, and that website is www.cwwga.org. And it lists all 11 locations.
Wonderful.
Right.
So now, you don't have to just wait for this special event.
Right.
You can go out anytime to those
Yes.
11 stations. And I understand, too, you're going to have a flyer to give out at
We
both of
will.
those locations
Yes.
that will talk about maybe the next time that you're going to
Yes,
have
it will.
one of these,
Right.
right? And give those stationary places.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right.
And we also would like to encourage everyone to follow us on our Facebook page
Okay.
and to sign up through our Facebook page to our new electronic newsletter, because they will be able to get information emailed directly to them or through their own social media to learn when we have other events coming up or additional grease recycle and programs like that.
Well, let me tell you, we want to thank you all for coming and being on our show today to talk about
You're
what
welcome.
gives us
Thank you
life.
for having us.
Great water, right?
Yes.
And so you all actually work for a place that we all really need to have an appreciation for.
Thank
you.
Because we want to have good water, whether
Yes.
we're bathing or outside with recreational activities or anything.
Yes.
So I want to thank you all for what you do.
Thank you.
And what
Thank
you have
you.
done in our community and the things that you all are going to do. And we're looking forward to our Help to Hooch. That'll be one of the things
Yes.
that we'll start talking about,
Yes.
you know, in our upcoming
Yes.
shows. And we know that it's going to be an awesome time for anyone
will
to get
be.
involved, for kids and adults and anyone in our community, because it's all about taking care of that water
It
that
sure
gives
is.
us
Being good
life.
stewardship.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Stewards of our water, yes.
That's right. So now, we love that you all tuned in for us today. Hopefully, you'll take this information and you'll use it wisely and share it too with someone else, because it's so important for us individually to be a good steward to our environment and collectively to do the same thing. Know that our Help to Hooch is coming up. It's going to be a little early this year. We're going to have it on the very first Saturday in October. So the 4th of October, we'll have our cleanup activities on our schools, making sure that the schools are actively involved in picking up the little trash that may be on their campus. And then on the 5th, we'll have the community-wide cleanup and the Watershed Festival. And I know that we'll be giving you a little bit more information about that. And don't forget to start putting your shoes away, because our shoe recycling campaign will kick off the first part of September. And just know that you'll be able to drop off your shoes that you're going to recycle at any one of our fire stations. So it's in 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, you'll be able to drop those off. So make sure that you help us out, because what we want to do is divert those shoes from our landfill. We want to give them to someone else who can use them, so they're going to third world developing countries, and we need your support. So thank you for tuning in. We'll look forward to seeing you the next time right here on CCG TV, the Keep Columbus Beautiful Earth Knows. Now make sure you're taking care of our water.
Coming up next on Columbus Connections, there are changes being made in Georgia to fight sex trafficking. We're going to talk all about that. Stay tuned. Welcome to Columbus Connections. I am your host, David Britt, and we have a serious discussion for this episode, and that's sex trafficking. Now, we hear this often, and some may think that this is a big city problem or not one of our problems. Well, there's definitely a problem in Columbus, just as sexual abuse is, just as drug abuse is, just as economic statuses that contribute to this is. All of these come together, and all of these make this huge problem of sex trafficking. However, Georgia has made some big strides in fighting this, and we have some people who are on the front line in fighting sex trafficking right here in our studio. So we're going to dig deep into it, talk about some things you may be familiar with and some things you may not be. So we're going to get into it. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm good. Thank you. And tell us your name, tell us who you're with.
Bobby Starr, and I'm the executive director of Micah's Promise in Columbus, and we're fighting sex trafficking of children.
Awesome. Now, not that sex trafficking is awesome, but it's awesome that you're here to be with us. And before we started rolling, we just had a brief pre-discussion. It's obvious your passion for it.
Yeah.
And it's a great thing. It's very needed because it's so big, and it's something like we said that people don't really realize the how big it is in our community.
Yeah. Thankfully, the Lord made me very stubborn. So I learned about sex trafficking of children about 10 years ago, and I was also one of those that thought it was an international problem, that it didn't touch us, and certainly not that it was our own children, you know. And when I learned about it, I actually learned that Georgia was, at that time, was in the top 15, and now we're in the top 5. You know, Atlanta's in the top 5 of cities for trafficking, but it's not Atlanta children, it's children from all over our state get recruited and most often get identified in Atlanta after they've been recruited from here. But they're recruited almost out of every county and groomed.
Well, let's start with the changes that are being made. What has happened recently that's fighting?
That is so exciting to me to see these changes. So in the past, it took forever to recognize that these children were actually victims of a crime. They were always treated as just bad kids or runaways. And unfortunately, most of the children still that are identified as sex trafficking victims, most of them have been in foster care, some of our kids are in foster care. So 89% it's the average that stays. But this legislation is so good because we now recognize and have to treat children, and it's legally defined, a child is anybody under the age of 18. So sometimes people will say, yeah, but the age of consent for sex in Georgia is 16. Well, legally, children cannot consent to being sexually exploited for gain, right? So that's the number one big thing. We cannot arrest children any longer for prostitution and solicitation. And that makes me super happy because the fact that we've been doing that for so long. It also, the super exciting part is the people that drive the issue of trafficking are the buyer.
Right.
Yeah.
So for so long we've been criminalizing the victim.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Letting the buyer just, get a slap on the wrist and bail out.
Slap on the wrist, bail out within a couple of hours, right? So the new legislation, and this is even just for general prostitutions. So any person soliciting a prostitute, now they have to spend 72 mandatory hours in jail. So I've done the math, and I'm not really great at math, but that's like 3 days, right? So your family's going to wonder where you are. Your job's going to wonder where you are. So this is going to have a huge impact because if you can put the pressure where it should be, which is on the buyer, and the demand, they're going to curb their behavior and or get treatment, right? Because maybe some of them are sick. And the research does show that where you use a demand approach, a reduction approach, where you focus on the buyer, prostitution decreases up to 75% in the community.
Yeah. We often talk about or hear about the trafficking, but we don't always take into consideration those contributing factors.
Right.
The abuse,
Right.
poverty,
Yes.
and neglect, and just how we treat our young women and young men, because it happens to young men
Yes,
too,
it
absolutely. But how we treat these people who are the victims.
Mm-hmm.
How can our community be better about that?
Whew, I have lots of ways I'd like to talk to you about that. And there are really good organizations that are really starting to collaborate and work together to do those things that we need to do, because when we consider that 89% of trafficking victims were first in foster care, well, over 90% of trafficking victims were first sexually abused. So somebody in their early childhood that they should have been able to trust, that they thought was going to love them, abuse them. And so what we can do in our community is, A, really care about our kids in foster care. They didn't choose to be put in foster care, but we stigmatize, right? Like when we look at socioeconomic problems and things like that, but we can stigmatize people who had no choice for what's happening to them.
Right.
So we tell people all the time, or organizations, I do trainings all the time, if you're part of a church, get your church to raise up foster families. If you're part of a civic organization, get your civic organization to raise up foster families. Because in Muskogee County, I think we have over 500 kids in care and less than 100 foster families.
Oh, wow. I didn't know it was that.
It's been that way there's a foster care crisis across the U.S. It's not just, Georgia problem. But this is like the sexual abuse, foster care to domestic minor sex trafficking pipeline, basically. So as a community, we have to help our kids. We have to help our youth. We have to treat them like we have to have this understanding that so many are acting out in school or acting out in general because they have untreated trauma.
Yeah, there's a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
I often hear of, everybody knows a victim of sexual abuse, but nobody knows the abuser. Nobody seems to know anyone who's done it.
Right.
And like you said before, so too often we focus the blame on the victim instead of the resources to help support them.
Exactly, especially because when we know that the majority of sexual abuse is actually by somebody the victim knows,
Right.
and or trust, or their family trust, or is a family member, the child oftentimes is given the idea to keep it quiet. Don't make a fuss, don't make trouble, right? So we really recommend stewards of children training. And that was the other thing I spoke to council about, was that we currently have Building Towards Wellness Coalition is one of our partner agencies or organizations in town that they received city grant funds to do stewards of children training for free in the community. And it's one of the most impactful trainings to help adults understand it's my responsibility to do everything I can to make sure somebody doesn't have an opportunity to be one-on-one with a child and potentially molest them, right? It's my responsibility as an adult to make sure that I set up safe zones, whether it's at church, just simple things that we can do as adults, or call out adults if we see them doing something that might be testing a child's boundary, but the child doesn't know that they can say, Uncle Ted, I don't want to sit on your lap.
Yeah.
Right? So that teaches really simple things where I can walk in and call out the behavior to Uncle Ted and say, it doesn't look like she wants to sit on your lap, Uncle Ted, and let her see that she can speak up for herself.
Right.
Or let him see, because boys are molested and they're even less likely to tell.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. It has to be such a labor of love. I could not imagine the things that, and you're so needed. You're so needed in what you do, but how it must weigh on your heart to do what you're doing.
Yeah. It is, it's hard. But what, people have said, I don't know how you can do the work that you can do. And the only thing I can say back to that is if a child can survive going through what they've been through, then the least I can do is fight for them.
Yeah.
And that we're seeing more and more people come and want to be a part of the work and part of the solution, just with that simple thought that, my God, there's so many people that have come through this and become stronger because somebody helped them. But if they can survive it, we should be able to fight for them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we talked the communication and making the child feel empowered to let people know when something inappropriate could be happening, to call out those things with people that are close to us, to say, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. What else can we do?
Well, there's several ways that, even just as the community, so Stewards of Children is the number one thing that you want to do through your church, through your, just as family members, you want to take that training, and it's free. The other thing is our school systems. So one of the things, exactly, in our schools, they're already under so much pressure to, they're on the front lines for everything. But but our teachers want to know what to do in case they might have a child that's facing abuse or at the worst trafficking. And there's a free webinar that we've provided to the school system that they created at the state task force to specifically for teachers. It's a 1-hour free webinar that they can take to learn what are the signs and how do they respond responsibly, right? So it's like Stewards of Children, but for teachers. And then we're also, the work group that I'm on at the task force, they've created what's called the TARG. And the TARG is the technical resource guide. They've identified the top 7 curriculums for the school systems. So think of Good Touch, Bad Touch. Have you heard of that?
Vaguely, but not a lot.
Well, Good Touch, Bad Touch for the longest time was the best curriculum for like little kids, right? Kindergarten, first grade, we talk about good touch, bad touch. This makes me comfortable, I'm not comfortable with that. So basically we're teaching children, again, they have to be the one to report. It kind of puts all the onus on the child.
The term itself, sexual trafficking, that's relatively, I would think, I don't remember hearing it called sexual trafficking when I was growing up, which is a good thing because it's really putting it out there for what it is. It's not being romanticized or made as a musical colloquial term like just pimping or even stripping. People are being trafficked. People are being enslaved against their will. And losing the most precious thing to them, which is their own body.
Right.
Their own self-respect, their own self-esteem, their own view of who they are as a human being.
Right.
So it's great that that is being put out there now.
And that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
Because when we think about this, so 10 years ago when I first learned of domestic minor sex trafficking of children, and I didn't have a college degree, and so like nobody was going to listen to me. I was just this professional volunteer, right? So I went back to school, and when I first went back to school, there was very little scholarly literature on trafficking, and so I read books that were written by ex-pimps and or some books at the time were. One book was called Somebody Else's Daughter, and it was a law enforcement officer in Dallas, Texas, that had been a law enforcement officer for 10 or 15 years. But about 10 years in, he started realizing, like, why do I keep arresting these kids, right, for prostitution? And one day he just looked at this little girl after they'd gone and put a jumpsuit on her and all of this, and realized this was a little girl sitting in front of him. And it just changed the whole way he looked at her and what he thought of her, because he'd been kind of over kids. He was getting cynical, all that sort of stuff. Man, it's just bad kids, right? Well, he started looking into what in the world is going on. Why am I arresting 12-year-olds? And so he starts figuring that out. So there were people all across the U.S. that this was starting to occur to them. Something else is going on here. But then what surprised me was, as a culture, we decided pimping was cool, right? And so I read this book by Pimpin' Ken Ivey, and it's the 45 or 48 laws of pimping. And your number one law is to find a girl who's already been primed because her dad or her uncle sexually molested her. She has no self-esteem, and then he goes through incrementally how to break her spirit. So it's like a domestic violence how-to to then sell somebody. And when you see that the the agenda, the plan,
Yeah,
you know.
and it's laid out.
It is laid out
Yeah.
that you're going to do this to another human being. And that's exactly, you have now said this person has no value. They're just a commodity to you. They're a property. And what does that remind us of?
Slavery.
Right.
Yeah.
When do we get to say that we're better than somebody else and they get to be our property?
Yeah.
And these are children.
These are children.
So if you can really apply that understanding and to know that these were babies that deserved so much more, and they didn't get it, and we want them to get some restoration.
And it's something that is happening. It doesn't all races, all people,
Yeah.
and you never know what kind of. I've heard people say, what would make a person become a prostitute? What would make a person become? You don't know what people have been through.
Right.
And when you've gone through that unimaginable trauma,
Right.
and when it's generational, when
Right.
that's all you know and that's all you see, to the point where you think this is the right thing to do. For me,
Right.
it makes you more susceptible to that trafficking and to those things.
Yeah. And you mentioned stripping. So, the definition of trafficking of children is through the use of force, fraud, or coercion, you compel, trafficking in general, you compel a human to either do a labor act or a sex act. When it comes to kids, we don't have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. They cannot consent to engaging in stripping or any adult entertainment, pornography, or sex in exchange for a material item. So if somebody is partaking in that, or even somebody, think of boys tend to be sexually exploited due to their homelessness. So if somebody exchanges food with a hungry, homeless 15-year-old boy, you have now commercially sexually exploited that child and can be charged for that. So we need to understand what commercial sexual exploitation is, or domestic minor sex trafficking. Engaging a child in any of those forms of, again, adult entertainment or sex for trade of something is commercially sexually exploiting a child.
Gotcha. How can people contact Micah's Promise? Because you guys serve such a great need. How can people get in contact with you?
Great, thank you. So we have a website, Micah's Promise, www.micahspromise.org. We also do free trainings to the community at the corporate center bi-monthly, as well as I'm a traveling roadshow, so I will go to your church, to your civic organization, to your school. I have certifications in several types of curriculums. We do Stewards of Children training, as I mentioned. Not a number curriculum is for middle to high school students to help them understand, really get a grasp on what the issue is and how to protect themselves and others. And also, I just recently got certified in a training for hospitality industry and hotels. So
Wow.
we train,
Yeah.
That's a cool one. So we train the front desk and the back of house what to look for. And the new legislation also holds bad actor hotels accountable. So, and this has been going on for a while. So in some of these hotels, everybody's getting a cut, a piece or whatever. So now they can be shut down and they can be held accountable in the trafficking process.
Awesome. We could talk about this. This is such a
I could
great
talk
thing.
yeah.
But if you're just joining us, we're talking about sex trafficking. And the great thing is that Georgia is instilling some laws that are really going after and fighting the issue. They're targeting the users.
Yeah.
They're targeting those organizations, the hotels and those businesses and things that are helping this big problem.
Yeah.
But there are also things that we can do as a community to help prevent it from the front end. And that's helping our children to identify when something is not going right. What are some of those other things?
Yeah, again, making sure that if you're an adult, seek out getting that Stewards of Children training. It's free in our community right now. You go online to d2l.org and you can just find a training near you and attend a training. Learn how to keep your kids safe. Also, online safety. Trafficking is across all borders now because all children have access to the internet. And now that means all people have access to your children. Children do not know how to navigate we didn't even cover this. That's a whole nother.
Yeah, we're going to have you back on.
Yeah.
We're definitely got to have you back.
That's a whole nother one. But online, make sure your kids, you know where they're going online, how long they're going to be online, and who they're online with.
Absolutely. Bobby Starr with Michael's Promise, thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you.
We're definitely going to have you back because we needed this information.
Thank
Definitely
you.
do. Again, sex trafficking is a big problem that affects our community, not just out there. It affects us, but it is within our power to fight it. So let's all be a part of that fight. Thanks for
Amen.
watching Columbus Connections.
Want to serve and protect your community? Then join the Columbus Police Department for a major hiring event on Thursday, August 22nd from noon to 6 p.m. at the Goodwill Community Campus behind Longhorns on Macon Road. The CPD offers great benefits, competitive pay, and even signing bonuses. You'll have the opportunity to meet with representatives from Patrol, SWAT, Explosives, 911, and more. For more details, visit goodwillsr.org/CPD or call 706-256-1837.
Providing information covering events, activities, and news from Columbus Consolidated Government, you're watching CCG TV News Watch.
If you're having problems looking for a job, consider your problem solved because a company called Global Call Center is bringing over 150 jobs to Columbus, Georgia, and has brought Governor Brian Kemp and city leaders of Columbus for their ribbon-cutting ceremony right on Buena Vista Road.
We're prepared to seat 600 people in this facility, so there's ample of opportunity for people here.
If a millennial wants to stay in Columbus, we can offer you a great career path and we can offer you a great job. And we also are trying to attract a number of programmers to come to work for us, people that do have degrees, but we found extremely talented people here who didn't have degrees. I mean, in the line of work that we're doing, we can teach you most everything that you need to know, and you'll be very successful here.
Mayor Skip Henderson predicts the impacts these jobs will have on the significance of Columbus, that he predicts will halt migration out of Columbus.
Number one, it's just going to provide almost 600 jobs. If you stop there, that'd be great. But the location of this facility, where it is in a part of town that is just anxious for some development, I think you're going to see restaurants, you're going to see retail. I think when we look back 10 years from now at the impact that they've had in this organization, it's going to be almost immeasurable. I remember years ago, people couldn't wait to graduate and move out of Columbus. I'm telling you, Columbus is the place not only to go to work with a corporate job and try to earn a living, but also to chase your dreams, build a family. It's just an awesome place to be.
Well, why did the Chamber of Commerce decide to put the building on Buena Vista Road? And what more can the job seekers of Columbus look forward to?
We take a dark retail center in a part of Columbus that needs an infusion of economic development. And if it weren't for Kurt and GCS having the vision of what an old, dilapidated, rundown, vacant grocery store could be, it would still be sitting here today as nothing. We're focused on not only call center back office type companies, but we're also looking for those in light manufacturing, those in logistics, warehouse distribution, and so we've got a pretty good pipeline of prospects. The way economic development works is these prospects, we try to get them to become projects and then become announced.
City Council member John House describes the reach the job location has on the city and Columbus leadership.
It'll give those 600 people work, and with them here, it should help all the businesses up and down Buena Vista Road and in this area, because they're going to have to eat at some point in time, and they're going to be here. They may have to shop for something. So I think it's going to help those 600 people and their families, but also every business up and down Buena Vista Road or anything close to here. The leadership of Columbus in the chamber and in the city are trying to take care of the citizens here, because those efforts to reach out to other businesses to get them to come to Columbus has brought this call center here.
So if you're tired of being jobless in Columbus, go to the Global Call Center's webpage and apply. I'm Mariah Jackson with CCG TV News Watch.
providing information covering events, activities, and news from Columbus Consolidated Government. You're watching CCG TV News Watch.
If you're having problems looking for a job, consider your problem solved because a company called Global Call Center is bringing over 150 jobs to Columbus, Georgia, and has brought Governor Brian Kemp and city leaders of Columbus for their ribbon-cutting ceremony right on Buena Vista Road.
We're prepared to seat 600 people in this facility, so there's ample of opportunity for people here.
If a millennial wants to stay in Columbus, we can offer you a great career path and we can offer you a great job. And we also are trying to attract a number of programmers to come to work for us, people that do have degrees, but we've found extremely talented people here who didn't have degrees. I mean, in the line of work that we're doing, we can teach you most everything that you need to know, and you'll be very successful here.
Mayor Skip Henderson predicts the impacts these jobs will have on the significance of Columbus that he predicts will halt migration out of Columbus.
Number one, it's just going to provide almost 600 jobs. If you stop there, that'd be great. But the location of this facility, where it is in a part of town that is just anxious for some development, I think you're going to see restaurants, you're going to see retail. I think when we look back 10 years from now at the impact that they've had in this organization, it's going to be almost immeasurable. I remember years ago, people couldn't wait to graduate and move out of Columbus. I'm telling you, Columbus is the place not only to go to work with a corporate job and try to earn a living, but also to chase your dreams, build a family. It's just an awesome place to be.
Well, why did the Chamber of Commerce decide to put the building on Buena Vista Road? And what more can the job seekers of Columbus look forward to?
We take a dark retail center in a part of Columbus that needs an infusion of economic development. And if it weren't for Kurt and GCS having the vision of what an old, dilapidated, rundown, vacant grocery store could be, it would still be sitting here today as nothing. We're focused on not only call center back office type companies, but we're also looking for those in light manufacturing, those in logistics, warehouse distribution, and so we've got a pretty good pipeline of prospects. The way economic development works is these prospects, we try to get them to become projects and then become announced.
City Council member John House describes the reach the job location has on the city and Columbus leadership.
It'll give those 600 people work, and with them here, it should help all the businesses up and down Buena Vista Road and in this area because they're going to have to eat at some point in time, and they're going to be here. They may have to shop for something. So I think it's going to help those 600 people and their families, but also every business up and down Buena Vista Road or anything close to here. The leadership of Columbus in the chamber and in the city are trying to take care of the citizens here because those efforts to reach out to other businesses to get them to come to Columbus has brought this call center here.
So if you're tired of being jobless in Columbus, go to the Global Call Center's webpage and apply. I'm Mariah Jackson with CCG TV News Watch.
Want to serve and protect your community? Then join the Columbus Police Department for a major hiring event on Thursday, August 22nd from noon to 6 p.m. at the Goodwill Community Campus behind Longhorns on Macon Road. The CPD offers great benefits, competitive pay, and even signing bonuses. You'll have the opportunity to meet with representatives from Patrol, SWAT, Explosives, 911, and more. For more details, visit goodwillsr.org/CPD or call 706-256-1837.